What's up, YouTube land? Welcome back to another episode 8 of season 2 of At Home with Mark. And today we are joined by the man, the myth, the Bigfoot legend that is Jesse Davey from Kingtone. Jesse, thank you so much for making the time, man.
No, thank you. Thanks so much for asking me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I told you, man, there's since August. So Joey Landreth was my first show.
Yeah.
And since then, people have been like, hey, you know who would be a great guest on your show? And I was like, who? And they're like, Jesse Davey. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I've already also reached out to him.
Wow.
But I'm glad we had it. This worked out that you could be on this time around.
Cool. But hopefully I won't let everyone down. He was so boring.
So just to start off, so I'm very curious about this with all my guests and all my musician friends too. Is like I have a very, very specific moment in my life that like I knew I wanted to play guitar and I wanted to like pursue music. Like, do you have something like that? Is there something that you can harken way back to remember?
I mean, a guitar wasn't my first instrument, actually.
Oh,
yeah? I started playing like keyboards or piano. My grandmother had this like old like electric organ, you know, the ones with the toggles that sort of you could like click in a bossa nova beat or have like, you know, strings with vibrato and stuff like that. So it must have been obvious that I was kind of interested in this. So one birthday, kind of like my parents sort of got together with my grandmother and they gave that to me. So she kind of gave that up. And so that was my introduction. And I think that certainly got me hooked and got me thinking about music, I guess, and thinking musically. Guitar wise, I mean, I remember when I first plugged in an electric guitar, I got so excited. I guess as a kid, you know, you'd walk past bands playing and go like, what is that? What's that thing they're playing? When I first plugged in an electric guitar, it was like so disappointing. It was like,
really?
Well, in my head, it's like I'd heard Hendrix or I'd heard like, you know, I heard these incredible guitar. I expected it to do that. And so when I played it, it was like, that's rubbish. And I actually put it down. I put it down for, I don't know, a few months. And then I think a friend of the family lent a fuzz pedal. And it was like, oh, okay. You plug in like pedal. Okay, I get it. It's really cool. So it was kind of like a bumpy ride in. But I think once I understood that the tone almost was as important in a way as what you played. It kind of got me hooked just with just making sounds to begin with. But yeah.
How old were you then?
Well, I think playing keyboards, I think I was about 10, I'm guessing. I actually don't know for sure. I'd say about 10. And then I was 15 when I got a guitar. Okay. So quite late, really. But I'd had a little bit of a head start playing keyboards. I kind of understood a little bit about music, I guess, and kind of transferred that over to guitar.
That's funny. I did the opposite. I started with guitar and then I understood like how triads worked and then I transferred that to piano. So
I still don't understand any musical theory at all. So even you saying triads, I'm like, I don't know. That sounds like, is that like a nomad tribe? I don't know what that is.
You got it. So what were you listening to then? Like when you were a young buck and you were 10 years old trying to play this organ, like what kind of music were you listening to?
Not what you'd expect. I think I was listening to things like, you know, Tubular Bells, like Mike Oldfield or Jean-Michel Jarre or something. I was just really interested in, at that age, that. But I think as soon the kind of things, well, I mean, the first time I heard Stevie, that was obviously a massive point that I realized. And I think...
when was that moment? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to know what that moment was. Like, when did that happen?
Well, we went on holiday. We'd go on holidays, like a camping holiday. So we'd like go to these fields and like just camp for holiday. And I used to absolutely love doing that. And one holiday, I guess, right after I'd started playing guitar, you know, I'd maybe been playing a few months. Someone lent me a Stevie Ray tape. I think it was like Couldn't Stand the Weather on one side and maybe Texas Flood on the other. And I just had my little like kind of little Walkman, and I played it the whole holiday. You know, that I just couldn't stop listening to it. again, it was the combination of playing and sound. That combination just totally hooked me. And then literally that night we got home, on the radio, because we used to listen to radio a lot. The news about Stevie Ray dying came on. Literally, so it was like that, a weird, intense listening to these albums, and then suddenly it was actually quite shocking and weird because I'd only just heard it. But yeah, so that was my introduction, and it was sad.
That's crazy, man. So what was it about that captured your ears so much? Was it like the visceral, like just pure? I know you said like the tone and the playing, but like, obviously as a singer too, Stevie was great. What was it like? What hit you first?
It's weird looking back on it, because now I know it really well, and I kind of almost understand it in a different way now. So it's weird looking back on that. I think it was everything, and I think like you say, his singing just fitted perfectly. I can't imagine any other kind of vocals fitting so well with that. And it's not just Stevie; it was the whole band. The whole band had an energy. Just on first listen, for me it just totally grabbed me.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, along with all the other guitar players in the world, probably. What was some other stuff that was like seminal guitar centric records? Like what were some other records that really pushed you to like want to like hone your craft?
I mean, I remember literally being blown away when my dad brought back an Albert King album, Live Wire Blues Power. And I put it on. It was on record. I think it was come from like a garage sale or something. Just put the record on, and I knew his name, and I knew I needed to listen to him. And the first track on that, I think there's a guest guitar player, but I had no idea. I thought that was Albert King, just like kind of noodling around. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And then this stopgap comes in, and then Albert King. I don't know if you're familiar with that album, but
yeah, I am.
His playing, it's just it literally blew me away. Hearing that was just like, oh my god, that's guitar. Just amazing. So yeah, that album blew me away.
Yeah,
really.
Did you make a connection at that point with him and Stevie? Like, could you see like the lineage from Albert to Stevie's playing and stuff? Did you start to connect that?
Totally, yeah. You kind of start to, because I think I first listened to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then you kind of hear Albert King, and you think, oh, okay. And then you hear like Albert Collins and BB King, and then Lightning Hopkins and Lonnie Mack, and you're like, I get it. Okay, so it's just like this amazing sort of mix of influences, and he took them all in, and I think that really that's really what any player does, really, and not just guitar players, but just like any musician, like kind of pull everything in and just do your thing with it, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was talking to Matt Schofield last week, we were talking about Stevie a little bit, and about how, I guess, Jimmy Vaughan, like a lot of people overlook him, but
right.
what a great player, as well. It's like, what was it like to be in Austin, Texas at that time, man? You know what I mean? Like,
I love Jimmy's playing. I know some people say he was the better player, and I can understand why someone might think that, and I think he's incredible. I mean, I think he didn't have the sort of flashy kind of like, listen to me kind of thing going on, but if you start to listen to what he's doing and the subtleties, he's an incredible player. Incredible, yeah. It's
like that authentic Texas, guitar vibe, like. Just that's what it is now.
It's really hard to do. It's not. I mean, it's easy to do. It's easy to do. Dare I say badly? It's easy to do badly. But those guys. No, I mean, we're all guilty of that. But yeah, I mean, it's all in the subtleties.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's on first listen, you're like, yeah, I can do that. But when you start listening, it's like, oh, okay, that's. Just to get that kind of shuffle rhythm down.
Mm-hmm.
It's really subtle, tricky stuff.
Yeah, and the vibrato, like that's something I think about when I hear you play. Is just the the soul that's in one note for you. And that I think that has a lot to do with, a lot of players that I really enjoy hearing is, and it's such a cliche thing to say, like, but this player can take one note, like BB could take one note and make you cry kind of thing. But like, it's very true. Like when I hear you play in your demos and all that stuff, and wherever it is, like your vibrato has a fingerprint, just like Stevie or just like Matt Schofield or whoever. Like there's something about vibrato as a guitar player that defines you as a player, because there's patience involved in that. There is like a bit of urgency too, like, because so you have to like balance those things in a way. Like how did you get into like working on that? Like that's a big thing for me when I talk to guitar players. Like,
yeah, it's something that really, not from any instrument, but it sets guitar apart from a lot of instruments, that vibrato, especially from any keyboard instruments, or a piano particularly. I think, yeah, vibrato is, it's not one of the things that you, it's not just an automatic thing. You kind of do it. It fits to the music. So some music might be faster vibrato, and it's very much how you feel. So it does change. It changes with the music. It changes with how you feel. I actually did struggle with it to begin with. I struggled because I often listen back to my playing, and it can be a really big mistake, but I think it's a great learning thing, is to always listen back. And I'd listen back to my vibrato and think, it's just not feeling right. It doesn't feel right. So yeah, I did work on it. And I think, this is probably too nerdy, but finding different ways to do vibrato, I certainly found really helpful. Like not necessarily, so like some players will do vibrato upwards. I certainly found a lot more strength. So someone like Albert King naturally is kind of doing it like downwards, like he's pulling the strings down because he's strung upside down anyway. Yeah. There's something about a strength about the vibrato pulling down. Obviously, you can't do that on the high notes, but yeah. So I think you hear people like BB, and like it's almost like their whole arm is kind of part of that. Yeah. So it's not just a finger doing this. It's like a whole sort of, your whole body kind of goes into it, I think.
Yeah. So how did you, like you were saying, like it's like not just one thing, it's several things. Like when you started working on it, when did that awareness hit you? Like how young of a player are you when you're starting to, like, this stuff starts to make itself apparent to you?
I'm still not there. I'm still working. Working on it.
But I mean, if we're being real, because you are a great player and you do have a great feel already, like, are you like, you get a guitar when you're 15? Are you 17 and you're really like starting to get this stuff into your hands a bit? Maybe not to the point where you are now, but like you're starting to understand it more.
Yeah, I think I practiced really hard. When I first started playing guitar, I was 9 hours a day for every day. I mean, I really practiced. I wanted to learn fast. And I think, in a way, I feel that the transition for me was maybe when, like people say, when you start speaking a different language, you're like, do you think in French, or do you dream in French? I think it's the same with music. It's when you start thinking in music and you start, maybe dreaming in music, it starts to come naturally and not feel like you're doing something technically, but you're actually trying to communicate, I guess. And that, like, so is fundamentally, that's what it's about. It's right. Very easy. It's very easy, especially as a guitar player, to forget that the goal is music. It's not speed or scales or, none of that. It's literally just how can you best communicate, with the listener. So I suppose, when you start maybe thinking in music a bit more, that's probably, for me, that's probably when it started to make a bit more sense. It definitely wasn't 17. It was later than that, but yeah.
Cool. So let's circle back really quick. So when we're talking about records and seminal records and whatnot, this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Is there an album that you wish you could erase from your memory and go back and listen to it for the first time because you enjoyed it so much? Is there something that you could re-experience?
Wow. Actually, nothing immediately springs to mind. I mean, I'm a massive Beatles fan, so those albums I think are very, very special. But maybe Live Wire Blues Power. That album for me just was it. That's it for me. That's like the blues. That album is the blues. So I think that if I had to pick, I'll go back to that album and just say, yeah, that's got it for me.
Yeah, it is a great record. If anybody's watching this that you've not heard that album, it is. You need to sit down and just like clear some time that you can just sit and experience it, or put it on while you're cooking. You know what I mean? Like something that you can have it in the background to catch your ear at moments, because it's pretty special. Jesse, what was your first guitar rig? Like, what was like when you how old were you when you started gigging out?
I think my first gig was in a church with a heavy metal band doing, was it AC/DC? something like that. I can't remember what song it was, but I think my first rig was an old session amp. I don't know if you know those. Like it's an old transistor amp. That was my very first rig, but I never had any money, but I'd been watching Stevie and I saw that he was using loads of amps. So I thought, I need loads of amps. So I ended up having like loads of really, really cheap amps. So I bought, the equivalent of like Craigslist in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I would buy, at the time they were really cheap. They're expensive now, but like things like Selma treble and bass, or a Sound City amp, and these would be like $20. I'd be getting them, and that's actually how I learned how to do fix amps and sort of build amps, was because none of these worked. So I had to kind of learn how to fix them. And so I'd have this backline of this. I think there's probably pictures of it online, but it's like this complete just mess of like the old cabs and amps, and some of them would be out of their chassis, and kind of it was a really good learning experience. I think if I'd had one good amp, it probably would have blown it away. But just using lots of amps, I used to use an old Leslie cabinet, like a full size. I don't know how I carried all that stuff around, like a full size old. I went overboard with it, but it was really fun. I mean, it was really fun.
Like a full 122 Leslie,
yeah. Well, it was actually I think it was a Sharma, so it was a full size Leslie, but not one of the wooden ones. Well, it was wood, but it was on wheels, so it was semi portable. Oh, but I love the sound, like a guitar through a full, not like a vibratone, but like a full with the horn, rotating horn. It's just such a great sound. I mean, it's one of those things that once you've used it, it's really difficult to take it out of your rig, because it adds such a broad range to the tone, but it's very impractical. Especially when you're playing like bars and stuff like that, and they'd be like, "What are you doing?" It's like, I'll fit it in, like putting it in cupboards and like, yeah,
man. I only did it once, like on one record I was recording. There was one in there, and he's like, "You want to plug into it? I just had it modded. We can plug right into it." And it was one of the most magical things I've ever heard. So as a pedal guru, like, who do you think has got the market cornered as far as like the Leslie sound, like the authentic, like really great rotating speaker sound?
Honestly, I don't think you can put it in a pedal. I think it has to come after. You see, if you put it in a pedal, you put it before, unless you put it in a studio setup where you mic the guitar and then put it through a simulator. You need to have the sound going through the speaker. So it's a totally different sound. I mean, I think, you can get actually really good sounds with vibes. That's pretty close to Leslie. And then, of course, the things like the Hughes and Kettner, which I know Doyle used a lot, which is really cool. But yeah, it's vaguely similar to a Leslie, but a real Leslie is a thing.
I took a lesson with Charlie Hunter back in 2011 or 2012, and I asked him the same question, because he had that Hughes and Kettner for a while, and he was like, Strymon Lex, man. That's like, and then I had him on my show back in early fall, and we talked about it again, and he was like, man, you know what? It's like interesting, because I'm not using the Hughes and Kettner anymore, because that sucker was too big, and then the Strymon came out, and that's better for me as far as what you have to carry. And I think he still is into using that one. I mean, I feel like Strymon does so many things so great. but it's that's the only one that I have. But I definitely have had your 1968 on a board and the like the Strymon Lex on the board at the same time, and it does get pretty dang close. Like if you're kind of going between those two, and I love the fact that your 1968 has the ramp up and the two different channels that you can into the other,
right,
like,
cool.
everything. Yeah, that's been a really fun pedal to have on the board, because I don't have a lot of the times, man. It's funny, I'll use like a harmonic tremolo and people think it's a vibe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not a vibe. They're like, what vibe, we're using? I'm like, it's just the Walrus Audio Monument, or the Flint, kind of thing. But it's a different drippiness. Like your pedal has like a different, like whenever you put stuff through, like if it's like a Dave Gilmour thing, like it's like spot freaking on, man. Like it's like,
oh, cool.
That is the sound, like 100%. That's the sound. So I'll have to pull out the stuff that I have of yours, but back to bands. So playing in a church. So when did you have like the first, like what was the first band's name? What was the first group? You remember?
I think it was Myriad.
Okay.
It's like, gives you an idea. It was heavy metal. I think the band only lasts 2 months, but I'd been playing 2 months. And I did my first gig at 2 months. I didn't bother playing rhythm to begin with. It was just like I was just lead, so I couldn't play any chords. Just go straight into the solo. Obviously, I realized quickly that you do need to know it all. But it's on tape somewhere.
Okay.
But it was awful. It was awful. But
yeah,
it was fun.
That's great. Awful's great. First band, I love like hearing first band names and like first like album titles from people, because it's so awful. It's so awkwardly awful.
Yeah.
it makes it so perfect.
Yeah.
So what happened after that band? Did you go like were you playing more blues bars? Like were you starting to get into playing blues gigs? Like what was after that?
Yeah, I mean, there were some local bands near to us that, we'd go and see. My mum and dad would take us to go and see them. And I think that was really inspiring to see, just to be there. Obviously in the UK, it's not so easy to go and see people to play, we lived away from the cities. So, and they were all playing blues. So it kind of, I think I got the bug and just wanted to form a band. So it was, with my brother, and then I asked my best friend Hugh, who's obviously the singer of the Hoax. He was my best friend. He was my friend for like 10 years, even before the band. So it's almost, we all lived in this tiny little village, and so it just felt like, especially having seen all the local bands play, it was like, it can be done. You just get together, and we probably couldn't play that well to begin with, but we had a lot of energy, and I think we kind of learned together. We kind of pushed each other, and so because of the local scene, it just had to be blues. It was like we didn't even think about it. It was just like, of course it's going to be blues.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, starting bands, with your friends is the best, I think. And there's so many people who are like, we need a better bass player, we need a better guitar player, we need a better drummer. I'm like, man, if you've got a good group of people who are reliable and you like being around them, and totally. You guys sound good together, you guys can get better. Like each individual person can get better on an instrument. Like stick with your buds. Like that's the best like formula for a good band that'll be, have longevity in a way. So
I think learning together is great, because you discover albums together, and I think that gives the band a real focus. Do you know what I mean? Because everyone's on that same page. If you bring, people in from all over, it's like, well, I'm not really into that sort of music, or I prefer it like this. But of course, because we'd just been in that same room, listening to those same albums and discovering that same music at the same time, we were just very sort of single-minded. And we kind of, at that time, we knew exactly what we wanted to do. And yeah, it was cool.
That's great. So how old were you when the Hoax started?
I think maybe 18.
Okay.
I think.
And you were already tinkering. You were already working on amps and kind of coming up with maybe even designs for pedals. I know you started that stuff pretty early too, right? Like building your own stuff.
Totally, yeah. for me, it went hand in hand. I mean, I started doing electronics when I was like, I got interested in electronics when I was like 7 or something, like starting taking things apart and having like, I think my mum and dad got me an electronics kit for Christmas once. And I was just fascinated by the idea that you could just like put these things together and just create something that did, basically whatever you could imagine. Mm-hmm. I was fascinated by that possibility. So I think, initially I got into guitar and played guitar and, it was great. And then suddenly realized, hang on a sec, I can use what I've learned with electronics to help me with guitar. And so I didn't immediately put the two together, but then I just started, building and fixing amps or building pedals. And it was all, it was all part of the search for that.
How many times did how many times did you almost kill yourself working on electronics? Like when you started?
Yeah. No, it's quite serious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to. I'm pretty lucky, actually, lots of times on stage, because what I'd do is I'd, be trying to get a certain sound. So I'd have my amp taken out of the chassis and kind of balanced on top of the speaker cabinet, like have little blocks of wood, so I could get to it. So I'd be like, yeah, I need a bit more treble. So I'd be adjusting it during, and so for the gig, it would be open. And then there would be times, like maybe the amp would be like kind of shaking off, and I had to grab it to hold it, and I'd get a full-on electric shock during a song. And that happened more than once. The trick is always have one hand behind your back, because as long as if you do this, if you do this and get electric shock, obviously through, that's the end. But if it's just one arm or one leg, it's just painful.
Oh my god!
But it was. Yeah, and of course you've got to step back up to the front of the stage and go, it's nothing, it's fine, it's nothing,
Jesse's hair is on fire, somebody get a bucket of water. Oh my god, dude. So what was like the first like pedal that you built that you were really proud of, that you were like, man, this is like, I got something here? Like,
right. I think with so many builders, I started with a fuzz pedal, mm-hmm. and just discovering how, because a fuzz pedal is super simple. The circuit's almost as simple as you could get. But that also means that the components are very interactive. That one small change here will make a really big change here. So just playing with that, 5 components or whatever, just messing around. I mean, that got me really hooked on like, wow, hang on a sec. You can really create sounds. And I think that's what got me hooked. Is like, wow, you can think of a tone and then work on it and just make something. And that was the idea, that you could do that was, really early on sort of hooked me. So it was a fuzz pedal for sure early on.
What was like a fuzz pedal that you heard, like if it's a fuzz face or a zonk machine or whatever, like what was the first thing that you started to play through that's the sound that you were hearing? Because, I'll pull out my SE fuzz of yours, and we could talk a little bit about that circuit, but like it's so interesting because you can do so much with that pedal. So like, what was the motivation to get to that, from the beginning, like from the fruition of you working on a fuzz circuit? What were you going for at that time?
It's weird. I had an old fuzz face, Silcon, 60s Silcon fuzz face. I think it was presumably late 60s. And I try and use it often. I'm in my setup gig, I'd try and use it, and I just like, it just didn't do what I thought it would do. And then this is going to sound really dumb, but then I discovered using it differently, using it only on the bridge pickup and, really cranking the volume and maybe having the fuzz a little low rather than the other way around. So even though it's a super simple pedal, but I just wasn't using it right. And as soon as I discovered how to use it, fuzz pedals, I think that's why fuzz pedals are one of those things where people are either going to love them or hate them. And I think it's, if you get used to how you would get the most out of it, they're like, wow, it's like full range, fat. They sound more like an overdrive. They don't sound, people think of fuzz as like, a fly in a bottle or something like that. But they're like an overdrive. People would think it was an overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, once I'd heard how they're sort of, I suppose, not supposed to be used, but how you can really get the most out of them. That's when I realized you can really, get very specific tones, again, with things like the bias and stuff like that.
Yeah. And let me grab this because I got to show you. So there's a few things that I started with. This was like my first goal to get this guy.
Right. Yeah.
Because of Doyle.
Of course.
And when I heard this pedal, I was like, okay, that seems like this is going to sound, well, you've probably heard people say this before, but you know how fuzzes can just like not be tamed? Like sometimes it's like no matter what you have them set on volume wise, they're just loud.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not helpful. This one was the first one that I ever played that I was like, oh, wow, like this is musical. It's a musical pedal. But man, the SI, sorry, I said SE before, but I must be thinking about PRS guitars or something. But this pedal, I felt immediately the same way about, and this one usually just stays on my board because I feel like the Fat, the Vintage, and the Zonk, you can get so many different variants. Like what black magic is in here, Jesse? Because it's, you know what I mean? And I feel the same way. This thing's got some mojo to it too, with like, crafting and curating some fuzz tones. But I think for me, I think Silcon is more of my jam. I mean, I borrowed a Sunface from my buddy one time because, everyone's like, oh, you got to try the Analog Man fuzz, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what it is. Like, maybe it's just not, I don't hear too many differences. Like if somebody like was to put me in headphones and be like, tell me which one's the Silcon and which one's the Germanium, I would be like, I don't know, dude. Like, yeah. But I know that anytime I play through a Silcon fuzz pedal, I feel like it reacts to how I play better in a way. Like, what's the deal with that? Like, can you explain like why Germanium, why Silcon? Seems like there's so many different points of view.
I mean, we try to make the Silcon sound Germanium. I mean, for me, the really high gain Silicons, I've never really got on with. I can totally see where they're good, but I've always preferred the kind of low gain Silicons, which do sound more similar to a Germanium. The main differences, I'd say, the Germanium is slightly more focused towards like an overdrivey type sound, especially with the fuzz quite low. It'll just sound. It really will sound like an overdrive. Whereas the Silcon has definitely got a slightly more harder edge to it. And also the frequency range of a Germanium is slightly narrower. You'll kind of notice the top end and the bottom end is actually there's not as much bottom end on a Germanium, which for certain rigs and setup that can actually work really well to have less low end. But it's down, totally down to the transistor choice. I think that's one of the. I mean, a lot of people get into the resistors and capacitors in a fuzz, and they totally make a difference, but it's really the transistors that make the big difference. So for me, with using a really good low gain transistor really helps it sound just, I suppose, more natural, a little bit more organic. The BC108s, the really high gain ones, that's a lot of gain. It's almost too much. It's a little bit out of control. And they sound great for specific things. They're amazing. But
right. Yeah. Like I could never play through a Big Muff and make it sound as cool as Billy Corgan. Right. I mean? Like it's just, I couldn't, there's no way. Like, but like to play through something like this, that's inspiring. Like I feel that way about a lot of the gear that I buy is like, and I just did a video about this last Sunday on my channel. It's like, why do we keep buying pedals? Like, why do we as musicians keep doing this to ourselves? And ultimately, I think it's because it's like, it makes me want to pick up my guitar. Yeah. It's inspiring. It's fun. We enjoy it. So why the hell not? You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Totally.
But this thing was a game changer for me in the world of fuzz, because before that, I had an old, like not a vintage fuzz face, but I bought one of the Dunlop ones that came out in the early 2000s or whatever. And that was great. It worked great to roll your volume off and clean it up. And then when you want to take, the lead, you just bring your volume up on your guitar and there you go.
Yeah.
I would usually leave it on all gig. I would just leave it on. And that was great. But like, I never found anything that was, you could achieve that, but you could also achieve like your amp's about to implode. You know what I mean? I love that sound, man, where it's like you know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's tell you the balance of how much drive you're getting from the amp and how much from the pedal. I think if you go just from the pedal and you have a clean amp, it'll sound really gritty and sort of very fuzzy. If you get too much drive from your amp and you're just getting a little bit from the fuzz, it'll sound kind of mushy. So it's just getting that balance just right. So you're just getting a little bit of drive from the amp, a little bit of drive from the fuzz, and you just get that magic sort of interaction.
When you're building your stuff and you're coming up with like new circuits and ideas, do you stack these things to see how they play together? Like if they play nice together kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, I'll always make sure. Yeah, I would hate to do a pedal and then just say, "Hey, I've plugged it in with the blues power, and it's doing these weird." I'd always make sure that they're gonna work well together. And I always think of so far, I've basically been building my perfect rig. This bit, I kind of been doing it for myself. It's like I make sure the fuzz pedal need the vibe. Obviously we'll be doing it like an echo or delay next. I just want to make sure I've got all the pedals there. And I think once I feel like that's my setup there, then maybe explore some of the more kind of weirder and more interesting effects. But yeah, they're designed to just be a pedal board. It'd probably be excessive if you just had a Kingtone pedal board, but that's what they're designed to use. I think I've tried to make them, it would be the pedal that I would choose. I mean, I wouldn't want to make or sell a pedal unless it would be the one I would choose. I don't want to like sell a pedal and then go, oh no, I actually use this other one. It needs to be, it needs to properly do the job I expect it to do, and I'd enjoy playing it. So yeah, they're meant to work together.
Okay. Yeah, I was always curious about that because I stack this guy
cool
with that, and it sounds dope. And you know what's crazy, man, is like, so I know you're friends with Emilio. This thing, so this thing was another huge game changer. I actually did a video on my channel just be like how different these are, because people are like, should I get the duelist or I'm like, dude, they're totally different, man. Like totally different. But I'm finding that this thing stacks awesome with fuzzes, like especially your fuzz. But it's funny because like now I have the other thing I'll grab. So yeah, I could have a small Kingtone board.
That's cool.
But it's were you gonna do a wah pedal at one point?
Well, we are doing a wah.
Okay.
So I was speaking to Doyle, name drop there, and he said, I really need a good wah pedal. I'm like, I'll make you one. So that was basically, I was like, oh shit, I've just said I told him I'd make a wah, so I thought, this better be good. So yeah, that was basically, he's got the prototype and he's using the prototype. So yeah, totally doing a wah. The thing holding us back from that is the reason why it's not out now is I just want to get the mechanical side of it, because it's really important. I don't want to just use a cheap case, like a basic wah case. I want it to be something that's custom designed and it's gonna not fall apart, because wahs have a tendency just to kind of like either squeak or kind of get loose or so yeah, we're taking that pretty seriously actually.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me at all. I know that your QC is like pretty hardcore, like before you put stuff out. So
right,
yeah, that's cool. What are some wah pedals that you like? I just went on the wah like journey again because I had so I have that the boudoir. I love that thing. That thing's great, like the original one. And then I recently got that exotic 3/4 size one. That one's great too. Are you gonna have like, is this gonna be like more based around, I would guess it is knowing you, but like more of a vintage, like no like Q and stuff like that? Is it gonna be just like, this is the one sounds dope, we're happy with it?
I mean, there's something about the Vox wahs, and especially about the old ones, that have it's kind of like a resonance in them, sort of, that I just don't hear in modern wahs. And so for me, it was about trying to capture that sort of kind of really throaty type sound. So as it stands, it'll just be kind of like do one thing, but just try and do it really well.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited. Here, take my money, Jesse. I mean, it's funny because I think, is it Philip Sace maybe has been doing some videos like about he's got a couple old Vox wahs, and he was like comparing them on his Instagram channel one day or something, and he's like, there's slight variances. It's funny because these could have been made a month apart from each other, but like this one is the one I really gravitate towards. It's weird. Like how, I mean, is that just based on like parts and like, or is it just always going to be like that?
I think it is partly based on parts. One of the, there's an inductor in a wah, and the trouble is that really allows for a lot of variation, because I don't know if those inductors were hand wound, but they might have been hand wound, the original Vox. And even if they're machine wound, there's a lot of variation that can happen in an inductor, and I think that's where, and also the way inductors have been treated. Has it been through hot and cold? How, was it was it potted or was it unpotted? And that inductor changes over time. So the main thing for us was to figure out why did this wire sound better than that wire. So that's really that's why it's been kind of a crazy process. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of old Voxes, and there's definitely one of them that just sings, and the other one's like, yeah, it's pretty good, but this one kind of got that sort of like kind of almost gonna take off kind of thing. It's almost gonna go off into feedback. It's like got that really cool resonant thing.
Yeah, so man, that sounds exciting. This just Jonathan just said this. Hoping he'd say Vox while it was been my favorite. I'll totally buy this one. So yeah, all of us too, Jonathan. I mean, it's funny because every time you put something up, I'm like, damn it, I had to buy another pedal, Jesse's, because they all sound so damn good, man.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind.
I feel like there's a kind of level, I think, now that everybody's trying to get up to in the pedal world as far as like quality gear for us to stomp on. Because not only like do we want it to sound good, but like it's got to take a beating too and still keep ticking, man.
Yes.
And that's what the gear stuff is like. So it's like tank proof, in a way. Like it's just, and it's funny. Like I love your choice of knobs, and it's a weird thing to say. Love your knobs, bro. But like your choice of what you use for like the aesthetics of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was showing my daughter, I can't remember if this was a couple weeks ago or a month ago, when you put that laser printing of the battery pack.
Right.
That was mesmerizing, man. Like my daughter, who's about to be 10, she was like, what is that? And I'm like, that's like gear, like guitar gear. It's like batteries go in there to power pedals. And because she's hip, she's in my office and knows what I do.
It's awesome.
And it's just like, that process must be so interesting for you. Because do you like CNC, like all that stuff? You have to like create all that yourself?
Yeah. So the basic is a fiber laser, and we actually have like 3 of them now. It's a different wavelength to the normal ones people use, like the CO2 lasers, which is great for cutting like leather or wood or something like that. The fiber lasers will eat into metal and some other materials too. So you can just do the designs in something like Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that, and then it takes quite a bit of programming, because a lot of the pedals, we're actually lasering through paint. So we're actually taking off a layer of paint all the way through to the aluminum underneath. So I remember when I first got it, I was just trying it out on everything, because it's just like you find things like a pen or the back. I'd go to my wife Crystal, like, you got anything you want to engrave? I've got to keep so like everything now just has like our name on it, and like just because I had to learn how to use it. But yeah, it's a really cool machine. It's you can do such fine detail with it, especially on like anodized metal.
Yeah, man, it was so cool. I must have watched that like 6 times, because it was like it's like the most fun. It's like, I don't know, I felt like I just got super high or something. It was
it's like a rave, isn't it? It's like a laser rave party. That's what maybe that's it. You should have like a fiber laser party. Mic it up. That's the future.
Yeah, man. We had a question here. Is it the Vox V846 Italian wah?
Well, that is one of the ones I've got. So I mean, it's not a clone. Okay. It's not. I'm kind of weird about cloning stuff. I always start with a clone. I'll build a clone just to see what it's like, and I'm like, yeah, I like this and this about it. But I mean, I suppose a lot of our pedals, like something like the Octaland, it isn't a clone at all. It's a completely original. But then something like the Mini Fuzz SI, that started out as a fuzz face, and then it just changed from there. So like with the Vox, the Vox is its own thing, but it started out that kind of vibe.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, so we talked a little bit about before the show, we've talked about Stevie a bit, but like we talked about how to approach playing like that. Are there other players that like, maybe like besides Doyle and some other players, contemporary players that you're like, oh man, like if you don't know about this cat, you got to check out this cat?
There's lots. When I first started playing, I was a little bit tunnel vision, and it's like, it's Stevie, it's got to be Stevie. But then it's like, oh wow, okay, there's other players, not even guitar players. I mean, obviously you talk about people like Jerry Landreth and there's, the Josh Smith and Ariel Poisson and all. It's like those guys blow my mind now. But then, people like John Medeski, who's in Medeski, Martin and Wood, like he as a player, I found seeing him play and listening to him is so inspiring. It's not guitar, but I think I borrowed a lot of ideas from him. He's like I got to see him actually in South Dakota. I used to live in South Dakota, and I got to see him. He was playing a festival. I hadn't heard of the band, and suddenly this band came on, and he's surrounded by amps, like stacked up, like proper. I kind of think of him as like the Jimi Hendrix of like Hammond organ players. He's like, it's crazy, and he's just like this mad scientist, and the tones from him and the band just. I was like, wow, that's. If you haven't heard any of the band, I just recommend just some YouTube videos. Like there's some videos of him playing I think it's a clavinet, just doing this crazy solo, and he's pretty crazy. But then also other players, fusion players, and Tom Quayle and Martin Miller. I think what they do is like crazy, and I love listening and trying to do some of what they do, but. It's so many inspiring players. Yeah.
It's funny. John Medeski's. I mean, I grew up listening. My older brother was like a huge MMW fan, so like we'd be in his room playing like FIFA soccer on PlayStation and listening to MMW, and like that was my first foray into hearing a go-go. So the first time I heard John Scofield too.
Right. Yeah. John Scofield. Yeah.
Like it was just like. And at that time, I mean, I must have been probably like in 8th grade or something, like when I was exposed, 7th grade, 8th grade, when I was exposed to that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was into Pearl Jam and like Seattle scene and like Soundgarden. And like, that's the stuff that I was starting to kind of shed on to learn how to play. Yeah. But when I heard that music and I heard a go-go and I heard, that record, Hottentot, the first time I heard Hottentot, I was like, what is this? This is super funky. Like, I wasn't even aware like of that. That was a whole nother world to me. But like hearing John Medeski play is so like, it's almost like he just has this reckless abandonment to music, but it works out. You know what I mean?
I think that's what I found inspiring, because it's very easy to play guitar and I think, it's got to be right. And it's got to be, you've got to hit every note. But hearing him play, you kind of think, you know what? In a way, he doesn't care, but he's amazing. And what comes out, it's like, it's just loose and it's just free. And I suppose Hendrix had that. That's why I think of Hendrix. They're obviously very different players, but I feel it's like anything goes. And from an audience member or a listener, that's just amazing. It's just you just don't know where it's going to go, and that's what you want. You want that sort of like unpredictability.
Yeah. Do you to this day still play keys and like still have like an organ around and stuff that you work on?
Yeah, totally. There's a piano, got a piano back there, and whenever I record an album, I always do all the keys and stuff. I love playing keys. There's still stuff you can do that's almost impossible. I think things like closely grouped notes you can easily do on keys, but to get a closely grouped note on a guitar, you're kind of struggling, especially if you want 3 group notes right together. And it's a certain dissonance you can get from a key, from a piano or a keyboard that it's hard to get.
Who are your favorite piano players? Like, who are some cats that like actual just piano, not organ, but like piano?
I mean, anything. I mean, I don't know if I can name. Obviously, John Medeski was one of my favorites. Trying to think. I mean, I also listen to a lot of classical music. So people like Eric Satie. Again, I think I'm attracted to the dissonance because obviously he really played with that,
Mm-hmm.
and it was beautiful.
That's why I like Debussy. Like when I was exposed to that in college, like
Yeah.
it was just more contemporary, you know, and not as, it just seemed like it was more adventurous to me.
Yeah.
You know, but like, you know, people that stem from that school have thought like, I love Bruce Hornsby. Like, do you know about Gabe? You know Gabe Dixon? You know about that cat?
No, I don't actually.
So he plays with Tedeschi Trucks band now. He's the keyboard player.
Oh, okay, right.
Trucks, and he
definitely heard him then.
Yeah, he has a solo career too, and has some great records. But like it's funny, he came up. He went to Miami U, so he went to Suntan U. So did Hornsby. So did like a lot of these cats. Like, are you into the Wood Brothers too? Like Chris Wood plays.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh my god, dude, they're like one of my favorite bands too, man. Like, they can do no wrong. Every record they put out, I'm just like, okay, this rocks again.
Yeah.
You know? But
yeah,
all those cats, like John O'Ricks, who's the drummer in the Wood Brothers, and Gabe, like both went to Miami U and stuff. And I had both those guys on my show, but talking to Gabe, you should check out some of his, like he's got that gospel thing, you know, like, that's where my heart lies. Whenever I listen to people play piano or B3, you know, man.
Wow. Well, I certainly heard him play, I guess. Oh no, Derek Trucks and Derek Trucks band, incredible. Yeah. Such a soulful player. I mean, that's kind of what you want to hear.
Oh yeah.
Him and Doyle Bramall, just yeah,
I know. And then having them both on the same stage sometimes, dude, it's like what's going on here? What world am I living in? But
yeah,
oh man. Well, so any other new like things you want to mention about the product line or anything that like people should be aware of? I mean, you've obviously got the website and you've got everything on there, and I need to, dude, my bucket list as far as the rest of the stuff that you have, like I've been wanting to play through a Blues Power because at one point I think I talked to you before I bought the Duelist because I was either going to get the Duelist or I was going to get the Blues Power. And I think you said like the Blues Power is kind of more of that clean circuit, like the not clonish, but like kind of like that kind of vibe where you can get a nice clean tone out of it. Is that sure? That's kind of the goal for that pedal? Or?
The Blues Power has been, it's kind of I've kind of kept it not intentionally secret, but I kind of haven't done a lot of sort of advertising and kind of showing what it does. But it's I use it a lot for solos and stuff because it's got a really strong tone section, and you can, it'll drive quite a lot. But you can so with it on the edge setting, you get a sort of a very glassy sound, but then you can also roll the treble down, so you get this kind of tubey sort of glassy amp-like tone. There's actually two clipping stages in the pedal, so it's not just one. Like the Duelist is just one clipping stage per side, so it's a bit like, it's very amp-like. So you got like the preamp clipping and a bit of sort of main tube clipping, so you get that kind of very amp tone. So I find with the Blues Power, it almost sounds like you're not using a pedal, but it'll push it up a lot for lead. So it's not just a boost, but it's kind of very transparent. So you don't feel like you're using a tube screamer or something like that. It's like it's not there, kind of thing.
It has a lot of headroom too, right? Like
yeah,
it's really loud. Yeah. Because I've heard people, I think a friend of mine has it, and he was saying that like he'll sometimes even use it as an attenuator in a way.
There are quite a lot of people who will put it right at the end of the chain and just use it if they can't crank the amp. They'll set it, set the headroom so it's just clipping just slightly, and because it's totally transparent, you wouldn't know it was on. It just means that when you push it with a pedal, it's like pushing an amp. So it's almost a good replacement. If you can't crank your amp, it kind of does that job almost. That's not what it was intended for, but I'm totally open to it. If people are going to use it for that, that's awesome. Yeah.
When you design that stuff, were you designing it based on like an amp that you love that breaks up nicely, or is that what you were hearing in your head, or was it like specifically for, a transparent boosty, guitar tone?
I was really interested in. I felt like it was a gap in the pedals. We didn't have a boost, something that you could use just as a straight I love my amp tone, but I want to be able to boost it for solos without changing it. And obviously, if you use something like a dualist, it adds a lot of color, a lot of sort of texture. But sometimes you don't want that. It's something you just want to. You love your amp, and you just want to push it. And I realized I didn't have that, so it started out as a simple boost and kind of got more complicated as it went on. A few more options, and that's pretty much how that started.
Yeah, it sounds great, man. And now you've got,
Cool.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff too. You've got the Rise, you've got Soloist. Like, there's a bunch of stuff people can check out. Are you still making the big fuzz, or are you just now only making the germanium and the silicon fuzz?
We do still make it. The trouble, and I think any builder, if any builder's watching this, they'll sympathize with this. Is germanium transistors are hard to get hold of, good ones these days. So that the big fuzz we make is actually switchable, so you can switch between two different types of germanium fuzz. It uses four germanium transistors, so it's been hard. It's been hard finding really good ones. So that's what sometimes holds us back. Sometimes we will be out of stock for a while because we just can't find anything we're happy with. But
yeah.
So we're still making it at the moment.
That's fair though, man. I mean, if you're like, because you're doing the QC thing, man, you're like, you want to use the best components. You want to like have the most reliable gear for us guitar nerds. So like, sometimes I can't remember where I saw this, but somebody was throwing shade at you guys, just being like, dude, it takes 3 months to get this thing. And like, dude, it's like, you got to understand, like, some of these parts he's using are not accessible all the time. Like, I never dive in and fight though. I'm like, you're never going to change somebody's mind. It's just like, it's pointless. But I appreciate that about what you're doing, is that, even like with this new wah and everything, is like, you're waiting until it's ready, dude. Like, you want to make sure that when it shows up on their doorstep, people are stoked, So
you just never know. You never know when you send a pedal out. You don't know whose hands it's going to end up in. You got to make sure that every pedal is the best. You can't say, oh, that'll do. You just don't know whose hands. You got to be prepared for it can go anywhere. Anyone who everyone matters basically. It just has to be everyone has to be the right.
Yeah,
perfect. It's tricky. It does take a long time. I spent a long time testing pedals, testing each one and making sure it does the thing. And I have my, like, with all the pedals, I have my kind of my one, if you like, my dualist that I've had from the beginning. And I always do A/B for every single one, A/B. There's other tests as well, but always do the ear A/B test. Just make sure, it's sounding as it should.
Yeah. That's great though. I mean, I appreciate that about what you're doing, man. Like, for real.
Cool.
And I think a lot of us do. And it's funny, my buddy Terry was like, still need to try that one. Now delaying a while. I think we all feel the same way, Jesse. It's just like, we are all gonna have Kingtone boards, bro. It's gonna happen. All right, you ready to do some lightning round get down, and we'll close this sucker out?
Sure.
All right. So,
okay.
Just so you're aware, you can, if you want, you can explain your answers. You don't have to. Like, you can just burn through these if you want. I think you're gonna love the first question, or you're gonna hate the first question, but it's always the same. So, gonna have a little bit of a suspenseful.
Okay, this is already stressful.
You will survive. All right, man. You ready?
Hit me.
Here we go. First question. Always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
Well, Lennon. And funnily enough, though, some of my favorite Beatles songs were the ones they kind of really collaborated on. So they're sort of opposites in a way, in the way they approach it musically and tonally, work so well together. But if I had to pick one, definitely Lennon. Okay. What's your top 3 Beatles tunes? I'm the Walrus, Strawberry Fields, and you know what? I actually really love the rhythm on Yellow Submarine. Ringo's rhythm on that. That kind of shuffly, kind of jumpy. It's awesome. Me too, man. We sing that song is like always in our house. Like if I'm not walking around humming it, somebody else is in my house. It's so weird. I mean, it's so catchy too. It's like it's such a great. All right, donuts or muffins? Donuts. Cassette tape or vinyl? Vinyl.
All right, this is pertaining to vibrato. Albert King's or Jimmy?
Albert King.
All right. TS10, TS808.
Ooh. 808 has to be. Yeah.
Okay. Isn't that what the duelist right side is based on, your old 808?
I had yeah, there is a big difference actually, I feel, especially between some of them. Again, variations, I won't go into it too much, but the 808, a little bit more headroom, and depending on how you're using it, but if you're using it to kind of boost an amp and you want the headroom, 808 just has a little bit more.
Okay. British blues or American blues?
American blues.
Okay. Power trio. Would you rather be playing in a power trio or a group with keys?
I just love what keys do. It means you play less. It means you can leave when you leave space and you've got keys. I don't know. I think I prefer guitar players that are willing to just leave space. So I think keys allow you to do that more. With a trio, you're kind of like it's hard work, you know. So yeah, keys. Please.
Amen, brother. All right. Batteries or power supply?
I do my own self-promotion here. You know, batteries, but not every pedal, but some pedals definitely benefit from a battery. And there's, you know, when you get into the details why, even if the only reason why you use a battery is because it's pure, clean DC, like so there's no ripple. It's obviously when you use sorry to go into your round here, but even if you're using a power supply, there's some ripple. It's almost impossible to get rid of every trace of it. There's some, you know, and that picks up. If you're using a high gain pedal, you'll hear it. You'll kick the pedal on, you can hear that little hum in the background. But a battery is just absolute pure DC. So even if it's just that reason, battery.
All right, fair enough. All right, ready? This is the movies. Okay, Big Trouble in Little China or Eddie Murphy and the Golden Child?
I have to say I haven't seen either of those movies. I love movies.
Jesse.
Okay, I've got homework. That's my homework.
So Big Trouble in Little Big Trouble in Little China classic.
Of course I've heard of it. I'm going to say that one.
Okay.
And I'm going to go watch it tonight. My homework.
All right, cool. And this is the last one. Sometimes this is the hardest, sometimes this is the easiest. This is a would you rather question.
Okay.
Would you rather have eyes that can film everything or ears that can record everything?
So are you saying would you rather
perpetuity? Like if you want to capture something, you can and remember it for, you know, perpetuity. Like your eyes could just film it, or
obviously so you're not losing a sense. You're just having I would say vision.
Okay.
I think I love music, but music's one of those things that it's temporal, and you sit down and you experience it in that moment, you know. But if you're talking record everything, then I think I'd go with the recording.
All right.
Please.
Cool. You made it through, my friend. You are through the other side. Congratulations. So, Jesse, man, thank you so much for making the time today, man. There's, like I said, everybody was saying you got to get Jesse on the show. So I'm so glad this worked out.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to say hi to my wonderful wife, Crystal. We work on Kingtone together. So she's not here because we're both in quarantine hair and clothes. So, you know, it would have taken too long to get ready. So
nice.
She'll be here next time.
Cool. Well, kudos to the both of you because you're doing some guitar players, some good services, man. It's been so fun to see like things grow for you, and because I've been on the wagon for a while, man. So it's fun to see all the new stuff you're doing, and we're all here with wallets open at some point, man.
Well, thank you. So I mean, really, the support from everyone is amazing, and that's for us. That's what it's all about. You know, it's to have the feedback and people being interested in what we're doing it means everything. That's why we do it. It's ultimately not about the money. It's getting a pedal on a stage and maybe inspiring someone. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, man. Cool. RJ Ronquillo just dropped in here. There he is. There he's saying thank you for some awesome pedals. Thank you for being awesome, RJ.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna peace out. Thank you so much for stopping by. This will live on the channel, so if you want to go back and if you missed anything that was nerdy enough that you went right over your head, go back in and check it out. But we'll see you guys. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. See you next time.
Thanks so much.